Hi, welcome back to Cambridge Inside Out. I'm Judy Nathans.
And I'm Robert Winters. And we're still sort of obsessing on our elected officials and their good deeds and wonderful wisdom, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah. No, it was you were at the actual meeting. Did a lot of people leave after the public comment?
The public comment, as we said, was dominated by this whole tree discussion.
Yes.
And I think that was brought up relatively early in the meeting. They kind of moved it ahead.
Well, they moved it ahead because they had Owen there, and they had some people they needed to discuss it.
Well, it's also good practice if you have like 80% of the people in the room are there for a specific reason.
Right.
Why let them wait till some?
Oh, well, that's the other. That's true too. I didn't think of that.
Bring it up early.
Right.
Deal with it.
Right. Right.
So they did that, and then after that, a lot of people left. Then it was just us stragglers, the usual suspects.
Yeah, I watch it at home, so just because I'm not there, I do watch it at home.
Yeah. So maybe we should talk about a few of the other items that are not specifically related to the tree.
Yeah, I'm trying to think
proposal.
of what brought up any. Go ahead, because some of them went over my head.
I mean, most of after that one big one, a lot of these things are sort of little itty bitty things. But some of them were kind of reflections of a kind of a long discussion that's been carrying on for a while. One thing that I found I'm going to mention this one because it was kind of funny to me.
Yeah.
All right, so there's a proposal, a very, very well-intentioned proposal to get rid of single-use plastic water bottles at city and school events. Okay? Now, personally, for me, I would bring my own water bottle, and if there was a spigot, I would prefer that, right? But I also can kind of understand how logistically that can be a bit of a problem sometimes.
I refill them.
Yeah.
But
so they just wanted to make it an outright "thou shalt not do it" kind of thing. Yeah. And I said, okay, if you want to do that, that's great. But there are two things that I was going to point out about this. One was Councilor Toomey pointed out something was funny as heck.
In the green room.
Oh my gosh! He says, "Well, if we're going to be banning these single-use water bottles here, does everybody realize ever since the beginning of time we've been having these in the City Council green room?" And he pulls out a single-use water bottle.
Even though I think there's a water cooler in there or something. Yeah. It's crazy.
Yeah. But I thought it's like, well, do as I say, not as I do, right?
Yeah.
So
start with the city building. Start with which I thought they did. I thought, well, they use their own water. Wasn't that Henrietta Davis's thing?
Yeah, that's right. And actually, Denise Simmons was also crediting Henrietta Davis for her
that was
early
important.
action in promoting
many things,
best
plastic bag, everything.
Oh, it's absolutely true. Yeah. Absolutely true. Yeah. But I just thought it was so funny when Councilor Toomey brought it up. And I'm going to say one other thing about Councilor Toomey, because back even when we first got curbside recycling going in the 1990s, and we still maintained a drop-off over Hampshire Street.
Still do.
That in fact, the one person amongst all elected officials who I most often saw bringing in materials for recycling was Councilor Toomey. And it's funny because he doesn't, people don't sort of credit him as Mr. Recycling, but as a practical matter, I can tell you,
he's pretty on there.
More than anybody.
Well, he's the one that got the whole small business thing going on recycling.
So he's so soft-spoken about these things, but he does, he does what he says. It's true.
And as bad as those bottles are, and they are, and I definitely promote reusables, just like the plastic bag stuff. But although I have issues about that, but anyway, it is recyclable. So are plastic bags.
That's right.
So I think at some of these public things, it should be obvious. And I know at the school cafeteria, there's definitely recycle, and that is the one plastic. It's not a 7 plastic, not a 5. It's usually a 2 or the recycling commodity. It is valuable. But
now, I know at the new schools, and I know it's certainly true at CRLS's in the cafeteria. They have those filling stations, so you bring your own bottle and you fill up the water.
Yeah.
So the thing is, they're doing the right thing. They're showing up at MIT everywhere as well, where I work too.
Yeah, no, even at the Moore School, they are using plastic cups, which can be recycled. They're a little thinner. They're not quite like the
but anybody could bring their own water bottle and fill it there, and I think that's really kind of the way you want.
And my other thing was, it did mention or use a non-plastic single container like a milk carton. Well, guess what? Milk cartons we're not accepting those anymore. If in the kids' schools, they're being thrown out because the recyclers do not want them, the plastic hose. So that's not a good alternative.
So let me mention one other thing that relates to the participatory budgeting, the items that were approved. One of the items that was on the ballot, but which apparently was not approved, because I checked it an hour or so ago, there was a proposal for a like a water truck that goes around to public events.
Oh, you're talking about the participatory budget?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because
right.
there's an MWRA truck that has come to, like when we did the Central Flea, sometimes you would have there, and you basically just there.
I've seen that.
Water.
Oh, right. It had like 3 spigots or
Three
something.
spigots, and you could just fill up your thing, and you could pick up a little container. And
Someone's got to pay
that.
for that.
So yeah, right. But the thing is that there was on the participatory budget. I don't know why I have a hard time saying participatory.
because it's a lot of P's.
Right. But the thing is that there was a proposal to the city to get one of those
Did you
vehicles.
vote for that?
I did, absolutely.
I don't remember if I did.
But the thing is that if you're talking about say outdoor events,
that would
part
be
of the way of addressing this particular order here, number 4, would that you should have a vehicle like that at public events.
But then if they didn't bring anything to put the water in, you're going to have to supply the paper cups.
Well, yeah, paper cups, or ask as many people to bring your own bottle if you want water. But a lot of people won't, so you have to have alternatives for the people who don't. But the thing is, it's at least a partial solution to address this one here. So anyway, I thought it was interesting, but especially the part where the green room still uses single-use plastic bottles. One of the items that was also on the agenda last night, which I found very intriguing, was an order, I believe it originated with Councilor Carlone. And I don't know really what the motivation behind it was, but it was order number 6, which was basically asking the city, whenever there's a petition for an upzoning, and I think he clarified to say, well, we're talking significant upzoning as opposed to there was a new zoning petition before the council last night. It's actually written by Patrick Barrett.
Right.
But it's basically just to allow a certain density for hotel use where there's already the same allowable density for other commercial uses.
Industrial.
So why not just let the hotel do the same?
Yeah.
Seems pretty simple and pretty good case to be made for it. But the thing is that, so would there be added value to a property by permitting additional development rights on a property? Upzonings would do that, right?
Right.
I don't know that the city has ever done any sort of financial analysis to say, well, to sort of put a figure to it, right? So in other words, when they were doing major rezonings, like at the Volpe site, or when MIT was doing the big south of Main Street rezoning several years ago. What was that, 2013, I think? Can't remember now. But the thing is whenever they're doing these things here, the property owner now has a right to build much more, so they have just received a windfall, one would argue. And what has happened over the years, typically, is that as sort of part of the negotiations, kind of unofficially, there's sort of arguments for community benefits or mitigation, right? Which but should it be 1-to-1? Like if we give you a $20 million additional development potential on this big site, should you be coughing up $20 million to the city? I don't think so. But the thing is that, as Jan Devereaux pointed out, when they were doing the Volpe rezoning, the council was at a bit of a disadvantage in that they didn't really know what the additional value that was being added as a result of the rezoning was. So when they were arguing for getting a community center and a certain amount of housing built, and they had
what would the figure be?
Yeah, I mean, so in other words, how was the ask sufficient to match the added value?
So doesn't this order just ask the city manager direct the appropriate department to conduct this kind of financial assessment?
Yeah, and I think that's a good idea.
Yeah.
In principle, I think that's a great idea, and it's information.
Of developments of more than 50,000 square feet. So we're talking not just
little itty bitties.
Yeah.
Right, but the thing is that I think there's wisdom in that, and apparently Boston's been doing it for decades, and other places do it as well. I think it's good information.
Yep.
And I think all parties, to whatever degree a zoning or rezoning is a negotiation, I think this should be done. Now, I will also say though that back in the 1990s, late 90s, when all the rage was down zonings. You could make a case that you were down zoning, the city was taking away that
you should get a lower tax rate, or just get money.
So should the property owner say, well, I demand compensation for that? You see, the thing is, I think to do these things correctly, you have to do it so that it's a two-way street. right?
Right, but most downzoning occurs because people want that. They don't want certain things in their areas, so they probably don't.
Right. So they view the community benefit as the down.
If anything,
zoning.
actually, it would
Yeah.
increase their value. Probably it depends.
Depends,
what
right?
it is.
Yeah. But anyway, I'm not going to fall on one side or the other
Yeah.
about what should happen as a result of this information. But I think the information will be useful.
Yes. So that was a
And
decent.
quantifying these things is a good idea. I think it's a great idea. Now, on the other hand, there's one other thing I'd say about this, and I remember the first time this really occurred to me was when they were doing a rezoning for, I believe it was the Novartis site, the sort of the mile in this fancy building they built down Mass Ave toward MIT. Is when it almost started to seem as though it was zoning for sale. In other words, there was an incentive among city councilors to pass a rezoning purely for the benefits.
So in other words, if you do this and that for us, we'll do this and that for you.
Like it was a quid pro quo. Now, sure. I mean, if you're going to grant value to a property owner,
You
you're
need
going
to
to allow
get
them
something.
to,
Yeah.
sky's the limit, whatever. Yeah, I think it's fair to say the city should get some, at least
But why
a
isn't
gesture.
that a special permit versus a zoning change? Or is
Well,
that, I
special
get
permit
confused between those
Well,
things.
special permits are provisions that are already in existing zoning. So the thing
Okay.
is, if you want to change the zoning to, for example, you could take a place where the only things permitted were
Allowed.
as of right zoning.
Okay.
And then if you say, well, that's not what I want, we would actually prefer to do like a planned unit development or do something where we want to do some transfer of development rights. Or else we'd be more than happy to actually go through some extensive design review and get input from the planning board on our project. And in exchange, we would then expect to get greater development potential.
So it has nothing to do with
Right.
changing the zoning, but getting.
Yeah, so what has happened
Yeah.
in some zoning
Yeah.
legislation in the past is they've established special permit processes
I see.
because it gives the city a little more control over getting a better product.
I see.
If the only development that can happen is as of right development, then the property owner just says, this is what we're going to do, and that's that, right? So
But PUDs, don't they get sort of grandfathered in though, and then you can't go back?
Well,
and-
PUDs are sort of like, it takes it to another level, right?
Okay,
the
but I
thing
know
is-
some people complain about those.
They
Because
do.
they can be left empty till they decide to.
Well, but the thing is that when you're talking about planned unit developments, what you're really talking about is like a chosen developer for a large area.
That is
where
good,
the
good
development's going to
phases,
happen in
in
phases
phases.
over
Okay.
maybe decades. So
Right.
you don't want it to be subject to, ups and downs of zoning legislation in the interim.
True.
So if they get the approvals, then they're basic, and they got to get their financing in order. It's all done
Right.
based
on
certain
that,
presumptions,
okay.
and you don't want to disrupt that too much,
Right.
right?
But can they just then all of a sudden change like 15 years down the road or run out of money or, well, I guess that's a different
They
issue.
could, and
Yeah.
it has happened.
Yeah,
It
right,
has definitely
right,
happened where
yeah.
the economy went south, and,
Right.
and so there are
Yeah.
proposals like, for example, North Point,
That's what I'm thinking.
where
because
everything
that was,
slowed down.
Right.
And it slowed down, took a long, long time.
but now it's
Yeah.
back up, right?
Now
Sort
it's,
of?
yeah, that's right. We're peaking back up. Though right now, when money was really cheap, I mean, I think they're getting all their permits in order, and financing in order when money was cheap. It's
True.
starting to become a little
It's-
less cheap.
That's
right now.
true. And that you're right. Yeah.
So there's a lot of projects in the pipeline down there right now.
Right.
So anyway, I think it's a great idea to get that information, but I have never ever liked this idea of like zoning for sale, and it feels that way sometimes.
Yeah.
In my perhaps sort of rose-colored glasses view, I want to think that maybe you pass zoning legislation because you have decided what would be a good plan for the city. Not because somebody came to you and said, I want something, I'll give you this if you give me that. To me, that's not really how planning should ideally go.
Well,
So in other words, if you say,
Yeah.
well, we've decided that this district here should have certain height limits, or it should be primarily housing or primarily commercial or mixed use or whatever, and you've hopefully, you've envisioned, there's that word again, you've envisioned some idea, some future, and this is what you expect, right? So you create the zoning based on the planning, and then the property owners should then build their projects in accordance with the plan. And it seems a little bass-backwards here sometimes, where it's sort of like, well, the zoning is what it is. We're just going to let it be what it is until somebody comes in and says, I want to change it because this is what I want to do. You
well,
know? And that just has never set well with me.
We got to get that table of uses thing done. What's happened to that? 'Cause
We're waiting.
To me, that affects so many things. Right?
I absolutely agree.
I don't know why it's taking so long.
Yeah, and actually even there was this minor zoning petition that appeared on the agenda last night was actually one where it says that, under the existing zoning in a mixed-use area, and I live in one, you can build up to a certain density if it's commercial, and you can build up to a certain density if it's residential.
Okay.
Right? Where a hotel fits in that is unclear. Is that commercial or is it residential? Well, the thing is that in addition to table of uses, like what's permitted to happen within a zone without you can always go for a variance, I guess, but generally you have to prove a hardship for that. But the thing is that in addition to there's a table of uses like what you can do. And then there's also a bit of revision, I would say, is necessary for what actually makes sense even as of right. So, for example, so this petition is coming in here saying in this one particular small site.
Are you talking about the one that Patrick Barry?
Yeah, so it's down at Broadway.
It's an industrial something A zone.
Industrial B zone. Yeah.
B zone. Okay.
So the thing is, says you can build housing, you can build commercial, but you can build much more densely for the commercial buildings and for residential you need setbacks.
So a hotel is kind of right in between there.
Yeah. So you basically say,
and it's a small lot that they're talking about, right?
Right. So they're saying, maybe it's not such a bad idea to allow the hotel to sort of operate it under the same rules as a commercial.
Right.
Well, that's actually an idea that maybe should be thought about elsewhere in the city too.
I thought a hotel was a commercial thing.
Right. I don't know. So all I'm saying is I think there are certain deficiencies in the table of uses and maybe a few other things that need to be revisited periodically, and maybe it's time we're doing that. And I would have hoped that the Envision process would have been addressing a lot of these things.
Speaking of Envision, I saw you there. It was sort of
we had
it was sort of like an open house. It was basically to display these panels that I guess have moved to City Hall, right?
They had
have they moved to or somewhere else? They were going to be there till Friday. This was last week, and then
move them?
But you were in City Hall. Did you see them?
I didn't see them, but I wasn't looking too hard. But the thing is, so they have an executive summary of the process, Envision process, and then the whole full-blown report, to come.
Well, that will be in later on, right?
Right. But it was the event that happened at the library. When was that? Last week?
It was last Thursday.
Last Thursday.
And it was sort of in the hall there. Yeah. Because there were a lot of things going on.
And
so it was kind of.
And it was not without controversy because there were some people who came out who. I mean, some of us have questions, and I was on the advisory committee.
Right.
I have some questions about Envision Cambridge. But there's some people who are pretty passionate about it, and they were showing up holding signs.
Yeah, what did their signs say again? I forgot.
A lot of them say, "Where's the vision?"
Oh, right, yeah.
And a few other thematic things as well. So they were kind of setting the stage for what's to happen now that these recommendations start getting translated into potential zoning language and other things. So the city manager, as well as the mayor, emphasize the fact that, well, Envision was just the first phase. Now comes the next phase. Actually, I would say the Envision is more like the second phase, maybe not the third phase.
Yeah, I mean, do you have a monetary figure? I don't know where the idea of $3 million came into my head, but that's why I've been operating on. It's at least $2 million, isn't it? It was a 3-year study, right?
Yes, and that covered the UTIL consultants.
Right.
I don't think that any of that money refers to the city staff because they're already on
so
city
it's basically
payroll.
for the consultants, wasn't it?
Right. So if you
and the graphs and everything.
Yeah, if you were to make put a dollar figure to what the total cost, if you would included city time in addition to UTIL, it's considerably more than the $3 million that was allocated.
Yeah, I mean it's a lot of money.
Yeah, so it's a fair amount of money, and we'll see where it goes.
But.
We've certainly talked about this before. I think maybe before the full report came out, they chose to emphasize some very, very specific recommendations, maybe to their detriment.
Right, because that's all that anyone talks about.
Regretting it now.
Yeah.
So I really don't know how this is all going to shake out, and it is a municipal election year. And people who don't like some of the things are gonna make it into big issues, and
Yep.
people who are promoting certain ideas are gonna make those into big issues. And you know, I guess that's sort of the next phase. You know, it'll be interesting. You know, to be sure.
You know, I just realized what's going on as we speak here is that this tenant displacement mayor's blue ribbon task is happening right now. I didn't know it was going to
Oh,
be
they're having
tonight.
the first meeting tonight?
This is what it says. It's funny because the River Street
Yeah.
reconstruction thing is
It's also
tonight,
tonight.
from 6 to 8.
Yeah,
And
it was actually kind of funny at the meeting last night.
Yeah.
There was a proposal to refer some item that was on unfinished business having to do with this Portland's
Oh, the Portland
tenant
relocation
proposal.
assistance.
So I think maybe it was on
Oh,
there. He said,
so
"I'd
let's
like
refer to this."
Let's
Yeah.
refer it to the mayor's blue ribbon
Right.
task force on tenant displacement."
Was that an official thing,
And then
though?
the
Or?
mayor says, "Well, I have a late communication establishing that task
Right,
force.
yeah, so,
So we can't really refer it to a committee until we accept
Right.
that first." So they did that.
Okay.
So I scanned that and put up the names.
Yeah,
of the
thank you, because I
so
know a
just
few of the
little
people.
pop here. So
Yeah.
there you go. Some of the people. And I don't know,
Yeah.
I know some of the people. I see Patrick Barrett. Is in
I
there,
know
you
Teresa
know.
Cordosi.
Yeah,
I
I know
know
a few
Patrick.
people.
I know Larry Field. You know him.
I know Sharon.
And Maura Pensack, very
Yeah.
active Hillary Clinton supporter.
All right, here we go.
Okay, so maybe I'll stop there instead
Right.
of the other one.
So anyway, so that's established. You know, that was kind of.
Are
interesting
other
to me.
people allowed to go
Yeah.
to that?
Actually, there's one thing about that.
Can I ask you that? Are people allowed to go to that? I mean, it's like you just
I
don't
would
say
hope-
anything, right?
I would assume
It's
that
at the
maybe-
Sullivan Chamber.
Yeah, then anybody
Yeah,
can go.
all right.
I just don't think there'd be too much opportunity for public comment. But I
No,
don't know.
no, usually there's not.
It's-
River Street construction is
It
not going to
hasn't
be
been
public.
stated yet, so that would
I
at
would
the
hope.
moment it would be at the discretion of the
I
chair.
just
And the
curious.
chair is Councilor Siddiqui.
I
So-
know, I see that. Yeah.
So maybe there is, maybe there isn't. But you know, if you
Well,
want, knock
first
yourself
meeting
out,
though,
go
no, I would not. I just would just be curious.
Yeah, one thing I think was interesting when I think it was Councilor Siddiqui was speaking about that, they were talking about the representation on the committee. So, I mean, I would expect on something on tenant displacement, it would be primarily tenant advocates and whatever, right? But the thing is, they said, and we've got representation from the Cambridge Residents Alliance and A Better Cambridge.
Oh.
And I couldn't help but think to myself, why is it that they automatically, by default, are granted a seat at the table? It's
well-
almost like an acknowledgement that these are the sole legitimate political representatives
Well,
of the
but
city. And
it's only one
I don't
person
accept
and one
it.
person, and there's like at least 15 on there, so.
Right, but the thing is why those organizations won?
Because they're recognized as dealing with these issues.
They are recognized in dabbling in the politics of municipal elections. You know, so and the notion that somehow you should kowtow to these particular groups is something I just don't like. You know, they're just a handful of people when you really get down to
Do
it.
you know the people on that committee that are part of those groups?
I don't actually know who the people who are listed
Alright,
there
so-
who are part of them.
So there you
I
go.
don't know.
No one's going to know.
All right. One other item that came up, it was not a particularly action-oriented item. In fact, it couldn't be, as was pointed out by the city clerk, was order number 8, which was about, again, it was yet another, it was the return of publicly funded municipal elections.
Oh, yes.
Okay, so it was an order by Councilor Toomey saying, you know,
Yeah,
we
what happened
wanna-
to the thing, because he
whatever
did this whole,
happened to
and
right?
there was an excellent meeting that Jan Devereaux did on this, where she did the whole history of it.
Yeah.
And I guess it was, maybe it was,
Right,
I don't know when
So
it
they were
was,
reading
yeah.
some report back from the city solicitor, I believe.
Right,
And also, there was a proposal that came out of that committee report late last year with Councilor Devereaux,
November 4th, yeah.
right, that was calling for something I'm a little weird about.
In
is,
consultation, to report back on the legality and constitutionality of the attached proposal submitted in the blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, now some of those
Oh, about the
were already
donations,
responded
yeah.
to by the city solicitor in a previous go-round.
Okay,
Like, for example, there's certain things having, city council, Cambridge, just as any other municipality in Massachusetts, cannot simply create its own election laws. They have to seek approval from the legislature for your
Okay.
own petition to do it, unless it's enabling legislation has already been granted, and then they can simply adopt
Right.
it. But that hasn't happened. So if you want to actually have something like municipally, like public financing of municipal elections, or I think some of Councilor Toomey's orders were putting limitations
I like
on
his.
funding.
I think that is doable because it was voluntary, and then publishing who is
Right. If it's done voluntary, then I think that's a good program.
Right.
And I would support it.
I would. I am not
that.
for taxpayer-funded municipal.
Yeah.
Nope,
One thing you can't do is you can't just put a rigid cap. You can't say thou
No.
shalt not spend beyond a certain amount.
No, but you can
Yeah.
say voluntarily, and then that's known. That's public knowledge. Okay, this person is getting. I don't
Right.
like the idea of not
And
getting
then,
money from outside
and then,
Massachusetts. What about your mother wanting to give you money?
I completely agree.
I don't like that one.
Right. So, I mean, what I think is fair game is, and I do this myself,
Mm-hmm.
is to publish profoundly
The
fact that
financial.
if somebody is getting,
Right.
85% of their funding from another state.
And outside of Cambridge or
Right,
something,
and almost nobody from
Yeah.
Cambridge, and
That
then
tells you
another
something.
candidate is getting
Right.
90% plus. And,
Right.
and I'm not just making these numbers up because
Right.
there were municipal elections where one candidate
Right.
was got like 14% from
Right.
Cambridge, and other ones where certain councilors get 90% plus
Right.
from Cambridge. I think that's information that the voting public would find interesting.
Yeah.
Right?
And I like Mark McGovern's point about why he has to raise more money because he has 4 kids and another job and he has to
Yeah.
hire people. So he was really honest about that, and I hadn't thought about it that way. And just raising lots of money doesn't guarantee you a seat, as we've seen.
Actually, I
So,
would, right, which is really one of the reasons why
Yeah.
I question the whole
Yeah.
logic of pursuing this
Yeah,
at all.
really.
Because the thing is,
Nothing's preventing someone from running.
right, and I can show
Yeah.
you in the last several election cycles, the candidates who spent the most money
Or not in.
didn't win.
Right.
You know?
And they're all invited to forums, most of them, right? You
Yeah.
can have 25 people up there at these public forums.
Right.
There's plenty of opportunity to get your word out.
Yeah.
And,
So they're candidates who fling money around
Right.
wastefully, so the reason they
Right.
spend a lot is
Too much
because of
paper.
that.
Yeah.
You can run a tight campaign with a lot of social
With
media.
social
and
media
you can do
now
that.
and everything, yeah.
So honestly, that's
Yeah.
what we need to tutor candidates.
So I see a voluntary thing on limits
Yeah, yeah.
and not,
Yeah,
no.
but anyway, so the issue is definitely floating around again, and I'm sure nothing will
They
happen.
want to report back by February 4th.
Yeah,
So that's next week.
I seriously doubt whether it'll be in place for this year's election.
All right.
Anyway, we're out of here.
We'll see you next week.